I had heard of the movie, but that's it. I didn't know anything about it. I also had seen some of the designs, and I thought the characters, while I knew nothing about them, were really intriguing. Everybody likes to be seen. Like my mother used to say this all the time. She used to say, there's no sweeter sound than someone saying your name. You know, it's sort of like, you see me, you recognize me.
Yeah.
You took the time to say my name, you know? And so I admit that does feel good. By the way, thank you for such an interesting question, as opposed to like, hey, you played Hulk. What was that like? This is a really interesting question. Like I can get a purchase on this one. This is really good.
Protection from who?
From themselves.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another installment of Jantmore Interviews, and as always, I'm your humble host, Josh, aka Jantmore. My guest today, you've come to love as the voice of Thor in multiple animated and video game Marvel-related projects. Nikolai, I'm probably gonna say the name wrong, but he was in Resident Evil Operation Raccoon City. We've also come to love him as Crossbones in Marvel's Midnight Suns, and recently as the comedian in the animated adaptation of the hit graphic novel Watchmen. Whether you've beat him up as Batman in the Batman Arkham game or have come to love his vocal mastery and his work in promos, you've heard this man time and time again, and I'm sure it never gets old. Please help me welcome to the stage returning guest and great friend Rick Wasserman. Yeah.
Hey, what's going on? There he is.
Hey, OMG, Rick.
It's good to see you.
It's been 3 years. Like, what?
That's amazing. And I have really matured in all that time. Can you
I have a beard now. So
I know. Look at you.
Oh, yeah. We both got
men.
Yeah, man. Thank you so much for joining me today, though. Like, I'm so glad to be speaking to you. Got tons of new stuff you've done since we last spoke and all that cool stuff. So I can't wait to dive into all of that today. But first, how have you been, though, man? Like, update the audience. What's been going on with you? How's life? How's bookings going? Well, bookings have been going well, obviously, as we can see. But
things are good. I can never complain. The fact is, I'm booking. My family as well. We moved. That's sort of the big thing that happened. I've been in Los Angeles for 20 years. And at some point we decided if we're ever going to move, now's the time. The kids were like between schools, that time when you're like not yet in middle school. Like if we're going to do it, now's the time to do it. But where? My wife's a school teacher and I'm a voiceover guy. We could really be anywhere. So we had a long list of all the different things we were looking for, and we put them into ChatGPT. We put our entire future in the hands of AI. This is the most Jetsons thing we've ever done. And it spat out Ashland, Oregon. We've never been to Oregon. So during the kids' spring break, we drove up and we spent a week here. And it was mostly like us with our hands on our hips going, okay, let's do it. And so we sold our house and moved everything up to Ashland, Oregon, and that's where we are now.
Wow. How's that been? How's the adjustment been? Do you like it more? How you feeling?
This town makes it really easy to love it. Like it's really beautiful here. The people are really sweet and kind. One of the big things was for me is that, Los Angeles is a big entertainment hub. It's entertainment 24/7. All the TV and movies and video games and animation all coming out of LA. And I just needed like a couple gear shifts down. Like I'm 50 now. I just want to bring it down a little bit. I didn't want to like hustle as much. There's other people waiting to hustle. Let them have a chance, And so my wife and I found that in our 50s, we were working more than we'd ever worked before because LA is a very, very expensive place to be. We moved here and the dollar stretches a little bit more for us here. It's like a couple gear shifts down in terms of pace. And the town we live in, we can pretty much walk it like from end to end in an hour. It's tight and everybody's smiling. And it was it's different from LA. I always love LA. I love New York. I live there too, but this is where home is now. And it's great. It's great. I got my studio. It looks like this. It's okay. I haven't moved at all. Right. I'm still in a room. I'm still with a booth, and I'm still talking to you.
Yeah.
So it's all very familiar.
Hair is a bit shorter now, but yeah, all the same thing.
That's right. Oh, that's another thing. When I came here, there's like a lot of like outdoorsy, kind of freewheeling, free-spirited people here. And I had my hair all long. And when I showed up, all the dudes here, it looked like Lord of the Rings. Like everybody had long gray hair. And I thought, I can't. I don't want to look like a hobbit. So I just cut it all off. And now I look different. No.
Well, that's cool, man. Well, I'm so happy to hear that Adjustment is treating you and the family well. I'm very glad to hear that. It's always a bit interesting moving because I'm originally from Queens, and I remember the first time when I came to move down here from Georgia and how much of an adjustment it was, because in New York, everything is so much closer. You don't need a car, but here, if you don't have a car, you're so done, or you're spending $100 on like Ubers. You know?
Yeah, for sure.
And it's more forest. It's more outdoors, like you're saying with Oregon. It's a change of pace.
It's a change of pace, right? And sometimes you need this. I know we must have talked about that. Where were you in Queens? Where did you grow up?
Jamaica, Queens, New York.
Because I lived in Sunnyside when I lived in New York while I was doing The Lion King. So I used to take the 7 train right into Times Square, 42nd Street, and the stage door was right there. I missed it. I loved it. I thought it was great.
Would you ever go back, or is Oregon kind of like, this is it?
Oregon's the pace for me right now. New York is great. New York is like intense. It's on. It's like this merry-go-round that goes really fast. And when you get up in the morning, you get on the merry-go-round and it spins you around all day. And when you're done, you step off and you're a little dizzy from the ride, knowing that in just a few hours, you're going to get back on. And like, I don't need the ride anymore. I'm done with the ride, I think.
I completely understand, my man. Well, there's other rides you've been on, of course, with all the amazing shows and features that have come out since we last spoke. I mean, I interviewed you in 2021, and then last year came Werewolf by Night, and I was like, oh my gosh. I remember I was just scrolling on Instagram after watching Werewolf by Night, and they were like, did you know the Werewolf by Night narrator is Rick Wasserman? I was like, wait, what?
The known universe, with its heroes and marvels. But what of the darkness? In our modern world, this is where monsters dwell, alongside those who hunt and slaughter them with pride.
What? I just spoke to him. There's no way. That's crazy. So I remember I tagged you. I was like, oh my God, my friend Rick is the narrator.
Yeah, I saw that. That was cool of you.
Yes, I was so happy because that is so perfect for you. Of course, with like your phenomenal promo work and only on AMC, like shit like that. Like, that's so cool to me. I was so happy that you got that role. Talk a little about words today. Talk a little bit about getting the role of the narrator, and how would you say your work as a promo artist has helped you really lock in what they wanted for that voice?
Yeah, I remember the audition. Disney was looking for someone like Vincent Price, but they didn't want Vincent Price. Like, they didn't want an impression, which is good because I can't do that. So my first knee-jerk read, like my first read is always, if I were going to direct it, what would I want it to sound like? Like, that's where I start. And that's what I did. And they must have liked it because they asked me to do it. And what was really interesting about this gig is that it was sort of like the height of the pandemic at the time. And they said, they can, if you want, you don't have to go to Disney to record. You can record this from home. And I went, I want to go to Disney. I mean, am I alone here? Doesn't everyone, we want to go to Disney. I want to go to Disney. So like, okay. So I went to Disney and it was so strange. It was like a ghost town. There was nobody there. It was like empty, strange. And then I went onto the sound stage and everyone was masked and there's all kinds of precautions and stuff. And I couldn't be masked, obviously. So they kind of just put me into this soundstage. And it's like the soundstage you see in movies. It's huge and there's a gigantic screen and like it's pitch black in there. And there's like one light and it lights up, your little copy stand, the microphone. You stand in this little pin spot. And all the producers and those people were all on a Skype grid on a monitor right next to me. So I could see all of them wherever they were. And there was one engineer behind glass behind me. So I was essentially by myself. Now, when I did Hulk, it was also very much like that. I was just by myself. So I was sort of used to that whole thing. And doing a lot of promo, I'm also used to just being by myself. So it wasn't a big deal, but it was weird knowing that there was a crew of people watching me and hearing me. They just weren't there with me. So on the screen, I would see what I was going to read up against, right? I could see it. So I got to see some of the images before anybody else, like mainstream audience. Well, that was kind of cool too. So I could kind of get the vibe of what they were going for. And they pretty much let me do what I did in my audition. They were pretty all right with it. They might have asked me to slow it down or pick it up. There was a whole bunch of different versions. They weren't really sure on all the language yet, so I did that. But here's one of the coolest things that I saw there. They ask if you want to stand or sit, and I always stand. I feel like it's like a singer or a stand-up comedian or or if you're giving a political speech. You're not sitting down, you're standing up, right?
It changes the energy.
It changes the energy, exactly. Thank you. So I'm standing there, and the microphone's in front of me. But before I get to the microphone, before that, there's this thing in front of me. All I can tell you is it looked like one of those workshop horses that you put like boards on to saw. It was like this black bar in front of me. And I thought, what is this for? So I can't get too close to the mic? Like, what is this thing? So I didn't pay much attention to it. And at some point in the session, I went, sorry, listen, can I just ask, what is this bar here? And they said, that was from Adam Driver. I went, Adam Driver? They said, yeah, he did a lot of recording in here and he asked for that. What is it? And they said, it's just a bar. Well, yeah, I know, but why did Adam Driver want a bar in here? And he said, he used it. He used it like he would grip it when he was intense and hold on to it. And when it was intimate, he'd lean on it and lean forward. And it was a place to put his hands. And I thought, I've never heard of that. I'm going to try this. So I put my hands on it. I thought, I got to have one. This is brilliant. It's just like, because it's sort of like you're on a roller coaster ride with nothing to hold on to. And something about being able to grip something when I wanted to was like game changing. It kind of like anchors you. Or if you have a lot of intensity, you get something to hold on to, and do something with your hands instead of gesturing wildly, which is not a great thing to do. You see a lot of voice actors like moving their hands a lot. But if you move your hands a lot, it shakes your larynx, it shakes your voice, and you can hear it, right? But this kind of grounds you and roots you down. I have to thank Adam Driver for enlightening me. And
new technique, a new
it's probably due to Adam.
That is so cool, though. That's a really cool story. And it just all goes back to what I was saying about standing or sitting. It just changes the energy and how you channel it, because you're right, like a lot of the times you'll see behind the scenes footage and people be like, oh my god, I'm angry, I gotta throw this, and it does change how you sound. It really does. I've been so blessed and lucky to be able to record a few voiceovers since we last spoke.
I know.
Yeah, and with me, I am, depending on the scene, I am very, because you can't help it, you don't, when you're performing vocally, everything comes out of your voice. Like no one sees that smirk or that grin or that anger, and a lot of times it just happens to come out. So if you'd be able to have something that channels that for you is really cool. So shout out to Kylo Ren for helping you.
Yes, Kylo Ren
for helping you out.
Yeah.
What was your reaction to being cast in go back, but what was your reaction to it finally coming out and seeing everyone's reaction to your performance?
I never think anyone, like as a voiceover person and having done this for so long, I don't think anybody thinks about me. They're just watching the show. Like, I don't think I'm even an issue. Like the only one who makes like any noise about it would be you and my dad, like I like no one says, no one ever stops me, or I'll say something, they'll go, my goodness, don't I know that? It just doesn't happen to me very often. But because of the high profile of this, it's Marvel, and because there's such a very
MCU.
strong, hungry fan base, and now we're in a sort of a different time where voice actors have some notoriety. You know, some of them are like rock stars. And by the way, they deserve to be. They do some incredible work. And so, yeah, people started hitting me up like, bro, Werewolf by Night. What? That's you. Like, yeah. You noticed? Yes, we noticed. We noticed you. So it's nice. I mean, I guess I don't need it. Like, I don't need for people to say that. I try not to make that too important, because if you don't hear it, then you can feel really let down by it. But the fact is that when they do say it, I have to admit it does feel nice. Everybody likes to be seen. Like my mother used to say this all the time. She used to say, there's no sweeter sound than someone saying your name. You know, it's sort of like, you see me, you recognize me.
Yeah.
You took the time to say my name, you know? And so I admit that does feel good.
I completely agree, my friend. I definitely have. It's been so interesting to see. Since I've last spoken to you, a lot of people have given me a lot of flowers and recognition for my work, whether it be my interviews or my graphics, which I've been getting into more. Fred Tatasciore I had on the show, and then I started, designing graphics for him, and we started to become closer and closer.
Oh, that's great.
And yeah, we had like a 3-hour dinner Sunday. We were
Oh
just
my
chatting
God.
for 3 hours. I'll send you a picture at the end of this.
Yeah, send me a picture.
It was so lovely to get that validation, especially from someone that I've grown up with, to see Fred just like, or even Steve Bloom. I saw Steve Bloom at this convention, MomoCon, and he hadn't seen me in we hadn't seen each other or really spoken in like 3 years.
Yeah.
And he, like, his face visibly lit up, and he gave me like the biggest hug, and we were talking. It's just like, to get that, it really, like you said, don't rely on that, because you want to make the best work possible, but to get that, oh my God,
Sure does feel nice.
Yes.
I think we forget that sometimes as voice actors. It's different now, but as I was kind of coming up, you were in an isolation booth. It's isolating. You're alone. You're almost always by yourself. The first time I was ever really with a group was when I was doing Avengers with Fred and all those people. Like, we were all in the same room. We really did feel like the Avengers. We spent FaceTime with each other, and it was really exciting. Like, even though we were all in a booth, the fact that we were all together didn't make it feel quite so isolating anymore. And I think we can forget, at least I did, that, we're animals and we need community, and you need a human connection at some point. You figure like, boy, I just want to get some voiceover work. I just want to get some. And then you get some, and then you're lucky enough to get more and more and more. And then you're spending all of your time in a booth by yourself. And I know it sounds good, and it is good. I mean, I'm not saying it's not. But on the other hand, you have to talk to people. You should talk to people. So I am continually grateful for opportunities where I get to work with other voice actors, or I coach and teach a lot. So I get to work with a lot of young voice actors. I get to talk to people like you who are interested, that want to know more, that really care. Yeah, that means a lot to me.
I definitely feel that. And I see that because, there's been a lot of conversation recently, of course, in regards to celebrity voice casting. We've been seeing that a lot recently. I think one of the greatest gifts that I've been given is to be able to speak to people like you who really do this and are professional and care a lot about your craft. And that's not to denigrate any celebrity or whatever, but it's just like, I want you guys to get the recognition. I want you guys to know that you have fans. I want you guys to know that your work doesn't go unnoticed, especially for someone like me, a young actor who wants to perform and wants to learn more. I want you guys to get that. And I'm glad that I have a space and that you guys have allowed me this space to give you guys your flowers, because a lot of the times it's just like, if you're not Chris Hemsworth playing Mario, which okay, if you're not that, a lot of the times you get thrown to the wayside, or you're not seeing. That's why I was so happy, and we're gonna get into this, but I was so happy when you got cast as the comedian, because it's just so cool to see that voice actors aren't completely disregarded in terms of animation. Like, you guys are getting big roles. I mean, if you guys have read Watchmen, you know how big of a role the comedian plays in the universe, kind of like the catalyst for the whole thing, you know.
Right.
Starts out with him getting thrown off a building. Like, that's a pretty big character. So for you to get that, I was just like, oh my God, thank you so much. Like, and, I was just really happy to see that, man. Now, for people who have listened to your interviews and seen stuff before, it's a very well-known fact that you're not really into like video games and comics and stuff like that usually. So my question for you is, like, you're in so much, you're in Marvel, you're in DC, you're in Call of Duty. I just found out you were in Gears of War. Like, you're in so much of this stuff that you're not really in the world of per se. So I'm curious, how has your relationship changed with like pop culture media, with you being in so much of it? Has it stayed relatively the same, or has it like grown more? You're like, maybe I'll pick up the game or watch the movie, or is it about the same?
Well, by the way, thank you for such an interesting question. You know, as opposed to like, hey, you played Hulk. What was that like? You know, this is a really interesting question. Like, I can get a purchase on this one. This is really good. I mean, look, I think overall, you like what you like. And that doesn't mean you can't change, but I sort of like the things I like. I like cooking. I like exercising. I like
magic.
Running. You know, like those are the things I'm into. And I was never, I just wasn't ever exposed to any of it. Like I just didn't have comic books. I just didn't have a whole lot of video games in front of me. I certainly.
I mean, to be fair about video games have changed so much since you were growing.
For sure. My kids now are teenagers, and they're like really into video games, but none of the ones I'm in. Like they have no interest at all. And by the way, they've always been like that. Like when they found out that I was Thor in an animated series that's on Disney Plus, which they have, they were like, cool. Like, well, do you want to see any of it? They're like, no. Well, you know, but it's me. It's your dad. Okay, never mind. I don't know. You know, I'm never going to be Thor to them. I'm always going to be dad. So what are you going to do about that? But I certainly have an appreciation for it. For me, it's sort of like country music. I don't typically listen to it, but I have an appreciation. I see the skill that's involved. I get it. And I see why it's popular. It just doesn't seem to resonate with me, but you know, some things don't, some things do. Some people like chocolate, some people like vanilla. I mean, who knows why? You like what you like, right? But I can certainly appreciate it. But I also have to say this. I don't think it makes my ability to perform any worse, like any less informed, because Absolutely. I don't play those things or don't see them. In fact, sometimes I think it gives me an edge. Like when I played Hulk, I didn't really watch. I wasn't aware of Fred's Hulk. I never heard it before. The only Hulk I knew was the TV show in the 70s. You know, I mean, that's the live action Lou Ferrigno, Bill Bixby thing. And so I didn't really know anything about it except that he was green. And so when I got the script for Planet Hulk, I just read it like I would read any script. If I was on stage or in a TV show or a film, I just read it like a regular script. And I asked myself, who is this person? What do they want? Who are they talking to? What are their goals or objectives? What actions do they use to achieve those goals and objectives? Like I would do for anything. Hamlet. Doesn't matter, right? And so I don't walk in with a whole lot of, I'm not comparing myself to Fred, which by the way, if I had, I mean, he's the best. He's the best. And I would have just wound up sort of torturing myself that I couldn't sound that good, but I didn't. I didn't compare myself against him. I compared me against me. And so my Hulk is entirely my Hulk, you know,
completely different from Fred's. And which, like you said, is an advantage. You know, I wouldn't want you to come in and do exactly what Fred did or vice versa. You know, you guys bring your own energy as performers. And I think that's what's so great about acting and performing, is bringing your own energy into the role, into that space. If I wanted Fred for your version of Hulk, get Fred. You know, right. if I wanted Rick's version of this more isolated, more thinking, more And you know the Hulk version you play. If I wanted that, I'm going to call you. You know, I think sometimes us fans, and I'm guilty of this, so I'm not calling out. I'm the Hulk. You know what I'm saying? But sometimes I think when we see a new performer, our minds are initially like, "You're not like them."
Right.
Yes, they're not like them. They are not them. You know, it's going to be different. What you bring
That's
to
right.
each role is going to be different.
That's right.
It's a balance because I love all the voice actors so much. So whenever I see a new guy, I'm like, oh God, you're not that. But you know, I've come more around.
You know, like that's how you keep the story going. That's why it's okay for another actor to play Hamlet and another actor to play Hamlet, another, right? Because really you are always going to be the vehicle for that character. You know, it's not like you're some empty vessel and you fill yourself up with Hamlet. I'm Rick. So if I ever play Hamlet, I'm Rick Hamlet. You know, I can't not be Rick.
New character, Rick Hamlet.
right. You know, so if people see my Hamlet and go, it seems a little Rick. Of course it is. You know, it has to be. And there's nothing wrong with that. Fred's Hulk is a little Fred and my Hulk is a little Rick. And that's just how it should be.
Absolutely. Couldn't have said it any better myself. Keeping on track with Marvel, I'm going to talk about Midnight Suns as well and transition into that. Crossbones. I really loved what I love about you vocally is this grit you bring to your characters. There's this sort of Rick stamp that you bring with each role that you do. So I'm curious with Crossbones, what in the audition that you can recall and remember helped you decide what you want to do with Crossbones vocally?
Well, again, they kind of give you some basic ideas. And I also keep myself from listening to any other version of Crossbones, right? So I'm just going to go at it my way. Like a lot of auditions, they gave us some images. And that does a lot. It does a lot for me, right? So while I'm in the booth, even like for Hulk, I mean, I'm obviously not the Hulk, but I imagine that I am. Like I try to take up space. You know, I imagine I have like traps like connecting my ears to my shoulders. Like I'm just massive. And that I'm powerful and strong. And people that are that big and powerful and strong have sort of a slower engine, right? They don't have to move fast. It kind of makes you feel more powerful to have a more even paced, speech pattern. And so with Crossbones, these bunch of bones, it made me think of something very dry and very gritty. And so I let that come forward in my read. And I play with it for a little bit. You know, it's not like I decide in my head, like, this is how it's going to sound, I'm going to do it. I have to read it and say it and read it and say it. And of course, a lot of it's based on the circumstance that they give you in the audition. They don't give you the whole story. They just give you a little snippet of it. Based on what they give you in that one little bit, can you create a circumstance that has stakes so something matters? And usually, you know, you never see a video game of like Crossbones doing the dishes or taking out the trash, right? Because those are mundane, everyday things. These are going to be moments, right? Dramatic moments that take place in these people's lives. So I try to make sure that the energy and drama is there, that these moments feel big and important and epic. So all that kind of goes into it. And then technically, in terms of my voice, you listen to my voice and it doesn't sound anything like that. Everybody's got a way to make their voice sound gritty and rough and textured, but I'm going to tell you mine. Okay. This is how I do it. The insider, under the hood. I used to think the only way to do it was to scream a lot. Like if I would scream, the next day my voice would sound really textured, which it does, right? Like you ever go to a party and you're like yelling the whole night, and then the next day you're like, well, my voice is right. So yeah, which is not good. That's like damage. And obviously you don't want to damage yourself, even though it might sound really good. Ultimately, if you want to be working a lot, you don't want to damage your voice. So I find that if I choke myself of air, like instead of using a lot of air when I speak, if I use less air like this, then my voice gets textured, right? And I can drop my voice into my lungs, right down here in my chest. And now I have a lot of texture because I'm just not using a lot of air, which is interesting because like last night we saw Beetlejuice, and we're in the movie theater. And when I have to be real quiet, like talking to my son, I'm like, watch this part right here. Watch this. I sound like I'm doing a Walking Dead promo, right? Watch what's about to happen right now, right? Because that's how I sound when on AMC. Yeah, when I'm not using a lot of air.
Oh, that's so cool, dude. I love this. I love learning about the process of creating these awesome voices. And I really do love your Crossbones. And not for nothing, funny enough, Fred Tatasciore also played Crossbones. So
Yeah, he's always ahead of me. Catching up. We're all catching up to Fred. He's the greatest guy in the world.
phenomenal, man. Yeah. And that's really cool. Is there a particular line you remember delivering from Crossbones where you're like, oh, that's interesting?
No, but I like all the sort of puns. There's always, all those games are great for that, where they kind of throw in those, like, there are plenty of one-liners. I have not played the game. I don't think I've played any game I've ever been in. I mean, like, I was Clayface in Arkham. Never played it. I don't know. I don't know what I even
You're
sound
killing
like.
me.
I've had friends call me and like, dude, don't you play so-and-so in that game? And I'll go, yeah. And they'll go, I just killed you. Like, they're all excited about having killed me. Not always the phone call you want, but yes, that's what I get.
No, my gosh. No, that's another one of my favorite roles of yours was Clayface. And I remember last time I interviewed you, you were talking about how they like slowed your voice down. And I remember going back and like looking over clips because I was making like promotional reels and stuff. And I was like, oh, I could hear it now. And it's just, just like stuff like that when you like connect the dots is always so cool to me. Such a bummer, man. With the Call of Duty games, you've been in probably all of them. I feel like you've been in like majority of them. I was looking. Yeah, you were in Black Ops 2, 3. I think you played an operator in either 3 or 4. But if you didn't, you were an announcer. Yeah, like it's just like, oh my gosh, like you're in so many video games now, and it's so interesting because I know you started predominantly in promos and stuff like that, and you talked about Avengers being your big first ensemble record and stuff like that. So I'm curious, with all of that and where you are now, how do you feel about doing more animation now than, say, more so promos? Or would you say you do more promos now than you ever have, or is there an even balance or stuff like that? Or
I find that I have always done promos. Like, that just seems to be my pocket. I do promo almost every day. I have a bunch of regular gigs and networks that I do. Like, the one I've been doing a lot recently for the past several years is I'm a voice for NBC for a show they have. It's like one of their flagship shows. Been on since like that network began, called Meet the Press, where every Sunday politicians come on this show to meet the press, right? Talk to the press. And so they have historically used men as sort of the moderators of these conversations. But now they've got a woman doing it. And so they had auditions for a new voice for the promos. Kristen Welker is the new moderator. And I auditioned for it and booked it. So I'm very proud of it, too. Like I'm happy to be on Team Welker. And so it's always like, this Sunday on Meet the Press. And then I say, Lindsey Graham and da-da-da-da-da and JD Vance and blah, 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 only on NBC. By the way, that's another really fun benchmark thing to say. You know how voiceover people want to say things like one man or in a world or rated PG-13 or something, right? There's like something in your head you want to say. I have always wanted to say only on NBC. And now I get to say it. So like, it's a silly little thing in my head.
No, that's so cool though.
It's a little bucket list thing I have. So I get to do that.
It's a milestone. That's awesome, man. Yeah. Oh my gosh. That's really cool that you got to do that. It's always so nice when you reach a milestone you never thought you'd make, and then you're like, oh well, I'm here now. So let's get to it, Right? That's really awesome.
Yeah, I'm proud of that.
Want to transition over to DC now with Sinestro, which was when I remember seeing, that's another role I was like, OMG, this guy Rick is on a roll. Like, yes, sir. Like, oh my gosh. I was like, he's Sinestro. That's one of the most iconic villains in DC lore. Of course you wouldn't know that, but
nope, he's just a guy to me, right? But again, like, same thing. They give me a picture. I have, they tell me the basic storyline. I have a script, and just like any other project, I try to take it on. And by the way, you'll notice that like most of the people you're talking about are bad guys. Like, I play a lot of bad guys, which is interesting because I don't think I'm a bad guy. I think I'm a good guy. So it is fun, and maybe it sort of like therapeutically lets me be bad for a while, because I don't live that life, but I can when I play one of these characters. So it is fun to kind of twirl your mustache and say the worst things you can. And also as an actor, I'm a teacher, so I'm always thinking like to let people in on process. Like as an actor, you're always playing an action, right? You're always doing a verb, like you are like to promise, or to assure, or to charm, or to tease, right? You're always playing in action. That's why you're called an actor, because you're in action. If you're not in action, I would suggest you're just saying a bunch of words, right? It's like a car without fuel. Like it could be a great looking car, but you need some action in it. You need to be playing in action. When you play a good guy, the actions are very different than when you play a bad guy, right? So when you're a villain, you get to use actions like to crush, to destroy, to demean, right? Which is very different. And so as an actor, it's fun to play a whole different sort of palette, a whole different range of notes as a performer. That's exciting for me.
What interests you the most about taking on the role of Sinestro? Because with you not having any pre-established notions of the character, what intrigued you the most about taking on Sinestro in this film?
I think what intrigues me about Sinestro and about all of them is that they're all so confident. Like these characters are so confident in what they're doing. And of course, with all of these people, there's always some like kernel of weakness. There's always something in them that they are trying to hide or bury, or right, that forces them, that kind of twists their life so they make the choices that they do. So I always take it, and each one of them, as sort of like an opportunity to do a little psychology, right? Because I think that's interesting. I think the human condition is interesting. It doesn't really matter to me so much like what cool one-liners I get to say. The writers are great. There's always going to be a great one-liner. I don't care about that. But I'm wondering, like, why does he say this? What makes him, what drives this guy? What has lit this guy's fuse? What is the inciting incident? What twisted him in the beginning? And Sinestro, like a lot of them, has an interesting background. So for me, that's sort of the joy in that.
Well, I want to twist the conversation over. Speaking of the human
Yes.
condition,
Yes.
Watchmen, one of the greatest graphic novels ever made, written by one of the greatest writers of all time, Alan Moore. Such a phenomenal writer. And I'm curious, with you not being in the world of comic books and stuff like that, what was your history with Watchmen before signing on to the project? Did you hear about it? Did you watch the movie? Anything like that?
I had heard of the movie, but that's it. I know anything about it. I also had seen some of the designs, and I thought the characters, while I knew nothing about them, were really intriguing, right? And this project, probably more than anything I'd ever done, was really dark. I mean, next level dark, like really tough stuff. And the circumstances around Comedian, were historically, I mean, I may not have lived through them, but I knew about them. My parents had lived through them, so I was well aware of them. And that's an interesting thing for me. It wasn't some made up universe. I recognize this universe. I knew those circumstances politically and what was going on, and I don't think I've really had that. Like when I played Thor, it wasn't like, well, this is America at this point in time with these considerations, these politics going on. Not really, not so much. But this one is very dependent on time and place. So I thought that was really interesting. And he's another really flawed guy,
Flawed. This guy's a degenerate. And this guy's very much a degenerate.
That's true. Although I will also say, anytime playing a degenerate, I never think of myself as that, right? You're always your character's biggest cheerleader. You must believe. Like, I have played Richard III before. The guy kills children in order to get closer to the crown. I mean, does horrible, horrible things. But somehow, during the performance, you must suggest to yourself that for this guy, it was the only way. It made perfect sense. Yeah, there's a lot of pathology going on there. It is not good. It is not healthy. But he didn't see it like that. And same thing for the comedian. He doesn't see himself as that.
Yeah. I remember what line I will always remember this scene in Vietnam when he kills that pregnant lady. He hits him in the face, and he's just God damn, and Dr. Manhattan's like, no, and just bam. Like that scene will always stick with me just because of how barbaric. Like
it's barbaric. That's the word for it.
That is such an insane scene for me. And of course, with you not knowing about Watchmen, what was your reaction when you had to perform that scene?
Well, listen, the animation in it, the style of it, is not wildly dissimilar to a lot of the other kind of superhero animation that I've seen. So in my mind, looking at the artwork, I just assumed it was pretty much the same temperature, pretty much the same tone, until I saw that scene. Like, that's not happening with Earth's mightiest heroes,
Absolutely not.
It
Absolutely
was
not.
shocking. Like, oh my gosh, that's really hard. And by the way, I will tell the truth about this. That was not an easy session. I'm an actor that likes to say yes and try 1,000 things, but I know this director was sort of wringing his hands over me, trying to push this thing and get it to sound the way he wanted. It was not an easy session. Like, I worked for that session. That director worked for that session. When we were finished, we were exhausted after that session. Yeah, it was a tough one.
Oh my gosh.
But maybe
No. It makes complete sense what you said. It makes sense because, like you said, the world of Watchmen is so dark and it's real. Watchmen is real. That's the thing about Watchmen, is that this isn't set in Gotham. This isn't set, like, this is real life, what was happening at the time. And kudos to Alan Moore for that, because it makes the story also more real and heart-wrenching to perform. If I ever get the chance to interview Jeffrey Dean Morgan, I'd love to talk to him about that scene in particular, because it is so difficult. And I know Zack Snyder probably had to push in places where he probably was uncomfortable going, because this, like we keep saying, this character is a degenerate. Like, he's not a good person. But Alan Moore did that by design. And I think that's the genius of Alan Moore, is making all these characters extremely flawed, but have their own perspectives, and you take your own, take what you wish from each character. I think that's what I enjoyed the most about, I guess, kind of this adaptation, is seeing it pull straight from the comic book and pull a lot of those like lines and darker moments out of there.
Yeah.
But my question that I want to flip to you is, what do you think the job of a good adaptation is? Obviously, you have books, you have movies, you even have games coming into movies now. Because there's a challenge with adaptations, what's the goal of a good one?
I think through any production that you do of any piece, especially if it is known, part of the canon, is that you are meant to take whatever you, the production team, director, producer, creators of that particular production, whatever's important to you, whatever resonates most with you, whatever way you kind of refract the story, whatever lens you're using to see it. Sometimes it's based on time and place. Like, I was in a production of Diary of Anne Frank several years ago. There's never a bad time to do that play. It's always an important time. But we did it just after that incident in Charlottesville, where there was white supremacists marching through Charlottesville. I remember, yeah. And this production wasn't done because of that, but it was heavily influenced by it. I remember that the cast met with a Holocaust survivor, and there's not a whole lot left. And we met with this person, and their big message was, don't forget. It's going to be easy for the rest of us to pass away and for this story to start dying. Don't let people forget. Know that it's right there. It's bubbling at the surface, that sort of anti-Semitism and all that. It's right there. So we created that production with that in mind, fueled by that, with that lens, seeing through that lens. And I think any adaptation wants to do that. It's not about putting on the best or the quintessential, or I wouldn't worry about that. I don't think that matters. It's just that this particular production team has an idea, sees something, and is turned on by some element of this story, and that is the thing that drives this particular production, what colors this production. And you should not feel like it has to be compared to any other production, that it has anything to do with any other production. I don't think you need to worry about that ever. It's just what turns you on about this story. And then that's all you focus on.
Couldn't agree more. I feel for anyone who's in the position of adapting any medium, because the reason you're adapting that book or that game or that show or whatever the hell you're adapting is because it touched you. And if it touched you, that means it's touched millions of other people around the world. Sure. So my heart goes out to anyone who has the difficult task of adapting a book or an animated show or a game, because you have a fan base that's very dedicated and that story that touched them, you know?
But I think you're right. You know, you're never going to be able to satisfy everyone. Everyone's going to look at some particular production. They're going to want something of it. Ever, right? So the idea is, I always think of the sort of Monty Python approach to this. And that is, they weren't so concerned as a team of comedians to try to make everyone laugh. They didn't concern themselves with that, because how can you? How do you know? What do you know? All they were concerning themselves with was making themselves laugh. That's it. And they knew that if they could make each other laugh, that at some point, someone else would find it funny. And maybe another person would find it funny, and another person. And that is how you grow a whole new audience. You know, I love that idea. You know, don't worry so much about thinking you know how to satisfy an audience. You know, just show them what you have to offer. This is the way I see things. Do you like it? No, that's fine. Someone else is going to do something you like, but someone's going to like this.
I think that's a constant thing that a lot of us as creators battle, is trying to satisfy, especially as you get higher up into the entertainment landscape, is, well, of course, satisfying investors first and foremost, because, you know, the almighty dollar is what you have to live and die by in the arts or whatever. But it's trying to satisfy us and the story we have to tell. But also, right now, I don't have to worry about that. Right now, I could just create whatever the hell I want, have any of my friends do whatever, and we can just create and go straight to it.
Yeah, but that's brilliant.
It's really freeing. But when we get more into the professional landscape of Hollywood, there's multiple factors you have to think about. And that's something I've come to notice as I've just learned more about productions and getting more into production myself. Is just that there's not one person, you know, there's multiple people behind every single project. And again, don't envy anyone's position who has to adapt this stuff. But I applaud everyone who puts their hat in the ring.
Absolutely, me too. It can be daunting, but yeah.
Of course, Watchmen is split into 2 parts. Are you involved at all with part 2? Is there comedian flashback, anything?
Maybe.
The almighty maybe. Okay.
It's possible. I have no idea.
We'll see.
I assure you, you know more than I do.
Probably do. I've read the comic read the comic so many times, and I've seen the movie, and now I've seen this, and it's so interesting. I don't know. I'm very curious to see what they're doing with part 2. Part 1 was interesting for me because it was just like the comic. And the thing about adaptations is, I think, to praise the Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes team, what made Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes so great was that is, of course, adapting comic books, and maybe you'll find a line or two in the comic, but it's also telling its own unique story. And I think that's what makes a good adaptation, is honoring what came before it, but also adding your own unique spin and making a unique story from it.
I totally go along with that. Yes, there should be a reason to see. If you're a fan of Watchmen, you should want to see all the material and get something different out of each thing, not just sort of like just in a different style or just in a different medium. Like this one was animated and this one was live action. Should not be the only difference.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I completely agree with that. You've been in so many games, and of course, the big I guess elephant in the room is that you guys are on strike. SAG-AFTRA is on strike against the gaming industry right now, of course, with a bunch of the AI precautions happening and stuff like that. And I'm curious, with you being on so many games and being involved with so many projects as you've been honored to be a part of. What is your take on what's happening in the industry right now in terms of strikes and in terms of what's happening with the advancement of AI?
Well, I'm proud of the union, and I think it's important to.
I'm sorry, could you say that again? You cut out a bit.
Okay, you got me?
Yeah, you're good.
Yeah. I am proud
Yeah.
of my union, and I think standing up for having clear rules and fair wages, I think is absolutely the point of having a union. And I feel well looked after, and I feel seen by the union. So I think that is as it needs to be and as it should be. And regarding AI, I have to tell you, I like I say, I teach voiceover too. I also teach voiceover at university level, and people are like, what about AI? And, is that something to worry about? Like, I don't know. Like when radio was the popular medium and TV came around, people in the radio industry were like, should we be worried about TV? I don't know. I mean, it's here. There's nothing you can do about it. It's not going away. You can panic about it. You can adapt, which is probably what we'll all have to do. I recognize it as a real thing. And right now, AI is very good at voiceover. It is. It's quite good. But it still doesn't capture the essence of humanity, the sort of variation and nuance and all that makes us who we are yet. It probably will get there. It's just not there yet. And so I'm going to keep doing what I do. And if at some point they say, you don't need to do promos anymore because this robot's going to do it, what am I going to do? Jump up and down. This is what has happened, since technology became a thing, since industry became a thing. Some people become moot. You just don't need them anymore. They get swallowed up by some other technology. So I recognize that it could happen. And so I think it's also important to know that, right now I am a voice actor because I get behind a microphone and perform, but I'm also a stage actor. I'm also a screen actor. I'm also a teacher. I'm also a lot of other things. So I haven't put all of my eggs in the voiceover basket because it's not, voiceover is something I do, it's not who I am, which I think is really important. I didn't always feel that way. I think when I first started, like, I'm an actor. Acting is my life. You hear like a lot of young artists say this, music is my life. I don't know that it should be. Like your life should be your life and you should be doing music.
Absolutely.
You should have your life and you also act, but I don't know that you should conflate them into being the same thing. That can be dangerous.
Would you say that's on purpose that you have these diversified interests and are in any other things, or is it just kind of happened by circumstance?
Yeah, just because I have other interests, like while I was in The Lion King. So I did Lion King on Broadway, and then I went to Los Angeles and did it in LA for a while. And while I was doing it in LA, I went to cooking school. Not because I planned on being a chef, but because I love to cook. And I thought, well, I've got the time during the day when I'm not doing a show, I'll go to cooking school. And so I put myself through cooking school. And I loved it because I had an interest, because it matters to me. And I like to learn. So if I had to cook, I'll cook. I like thinking that, we've got time on this planet and you get to decide what you want to do with this time, and that you don't have to feel like tethered to one thing. Because you've stated, I'm a voice actor. Okay, well, that doesn't mean you can't do other stuff. You sure can. And I like hearing that. Like some of my voice actor friends or people that I don't even know in the voice industry on social media, seeing all the myriad other things they do is really exciting to me. And it's great. Yes. Get out of the booth. Spend a little time out,
Get that exercise in, my friend. Yeah, man.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a good place to end this return to Jantmore for the time being. Thank you so much, Rick, for joining me. It's always a pleasure. I'm so happy to talk to you. Thank you for giving your insight and into the industry and stuff like that. And can't wait to see what you do next. I know you probably have tons of other things you can't talk about, but I'm so excited to see all of it. And I can't wait to bring you back on the show another time.
Well, when something comes up, I'll be sure and let you know.
Y'all heard it. But Rick, y'all make sure to please follow Rick on Instagram. Follow Rick on, you don't use Twitter, right?
I am on all the social media platforms under Bookable VO. That's the company I use to coach and make demos for other voice actors, and for trybooth.com. TriBooth is the mobile studio that I created that I have been using that allows me to get away from the house and vacation and do voiceovers. So that's how people can find me.
Awesome. But you guys, thank you so much. Have a phenomenal day, and I'll see you on my next Jantmore interview. Peace, love, safety. Till next time.